There is something happening underneath your strawberry mulch right now that most gardeners never think to check. You spread it down last season, maybe the season before that. It looked neat, it kept the weeds back, and you moved on. But if you were to pull that layer back this evening, what you found underneath would change the way you think about mulch entirely. Because while you were focusing on your plants, something else was focusing on your mulch, something that slides through darkness, dissolves the flesh of ripening fruit, and reproduces in the exact conditions you have been maintaining for it without realizing it. Today, we need to talk about what old mulch is actually doing to your strawberry bed. Once you've finished reading this, I assure you, aged mulch will never again be left sitting there untouched in your garden. Before we talk about the mulch itself, we need to talk about the slug. Most gardeners treat slugs as a minor inconvenience, a few holes in a leaf, a silvery trail across the soil surface in the morning. But the damage a slug population does to a strawberry planting is not minor, and it is not random. Slugs are precision feeders on soft, ripening, sugar-rich tissue, which is precisely what a strawberry is. They do not eat what is green and firm. They wait. They wait until the berries begin to color, until the sugars concentrate, and then they emerge after dark and bore directly into the fruit. By morning, what you find is not a slug. What you find is a ruined berry, hollowed from the underside, still attached to the plant, still looking almost normal until you turn it over. That timing is not accidental. Slugs are moisture-dependent animals. Their bodies are largely water. Their movement requires a film of mucus, and their activity shuts down completely in dry conditions. What they need, above almost everything else, is a stable, humid, protected environment where they can shelter during the day and move freely at night. Old mulch is exactly that, a layer of straw, wood chips, or shredded leaves that has been sitting in place through one full growing season and into the next, becomes something fundamentally different from what it was when you laid it down. It compresses, it mats. The interior stays damp even when the surface appears dry. It forms the biological equivalent of a slug hotel, and your slugs are not checking out. Here is what most gardeners do not realize about decomposing mulch, and why it matters so much in a strawberry bed specifically. Fresh mulch breaks down slowly. It is loose. It allows airflow. It dries between rain events, and it does not hold moisture long enough to create consistently favorable conditions for slug activity. Old mulch that has been in place for 12 months or more has passed through a transformation. The material compresses under its own weight, fungal threads bind the particles together, and the interior moisture level stabilizes at something close to permanent dampness. You are no longer looking at mulch. You are looking at a slug habitat that also happens to be positioned directly beneath the most slug-attractive crop you can grow. The strawberry and the old mulch are a combination that nearly guarantees population pressure. The numbers behind this problem are worth understanding. A single slug can lay up to 300 eggs in a season. The eggs are deposited in clusters, 2 to 4 centimeters deep, in moist organic matter. Old compacted mulch is one of the preferred egg-laying sites for the most damaging species, including the gray garden slug and the Spanish slug, which has expanded aggressively across North American growing regions over the past 2 decades. Consider what that reproductive rate means in practical terms. If you begin a season with 10 slugs sheltering in your mulch, and each one lays 200 eggs, and even half of those eggs hatch, you are managing over 1,000 slugs in that bed by midsummer. Let that settle for a moment. 1,000 animals targeting a single planting of straw. You berries, all of them emerging from the layer you put down to protect the plants. There is another dimension to old mulch that goes beyond slugs, and it is one that gardeners with strawberries need to take seriously. Aged, wet organic matter sitting in contact with or near crown tissue becomes a reservoir for fungal pathogens. Botrytis cinerea, the gray mold that collapses strawberry fruit almost overnight in wet weather, does not appear from nowhere. It overwinters in plant debris and decomposing organic material. It builds spore loads in exactly the conditions that old mulch sustains. Phytophthora crown rot, which can kill entire plants in a single season, is a water mold that depends on saturated conditions around the crown to infect. When you leave old, matted mulch pushed against the crowns of your strawberry plants through winter and into the next growing season, you are maintaining the precise microclimate that both of these pathogens require to thrive. So how do you know whether your mulch has crossed from beneficial to harmful? Pull a section back and look at what is underneath. Fresh or functional mulch will be loose, will have dry particles mixed with moist ones, and the soil beneath will be visible and aerated. Old mulch that has become a problem will peel back in a mat. The underside will be white with fungal growth. The soil beneath it will be compacted, darker than it should be, and if you look carefully in the early morning, you may find slugs retreated under that mat, pressed flat against the soil, waiting for nightfall. If you find that, your decision has already been made for you. The mulch needs to come out. The timing of removal matters. Do not wait until your strawberries are actively flowering or setting fruit to address this. The window to act is early spring, before new growth is more than a few centimeters tall, when the crowns are still dormant or just breaking. Rake the old mulch entirely out of the bed. Do not pile it along the edges where slugs will simply migrate back in. Bag it, hot compost it in a pile large enough to generate real heat, or dispose of it away from your garden. Once the old material is out, give the soil surface a few days of exposure to sun and wind before you apply anything new. That exposure alone will kill or drive off a significant portion of the slug population that was sheltering beneath it. When you do remulch, your choice of material and the way you apply it determine how long it stays beneficial. Fresh straw, applied loosely at no more than 5 centimeters depth, is the standard recommendation for strawberry beds because it dries quickly between rain events and does not mat. Pine needles are an excellent alternative. They interlock loosely, shed water, acidify the soil surface slightly in a way that strawberries prefer, and they do not compact into the kind of dense layer that slugs colonize. What you want to avoid is anything with a fine particle size, shredded wood, fine bark mulch, or grass clippings, all of which pack tightly and hold moisture in exactly the way that makes life easy for slugs and pathogens alike. Keeping your mulch layer working for you instead of against you also requires a seasonal discipline. Check the layer in midsummer and again in autumn. If it has compressed to a dense mat in any section, loosen it with a fork or remove and replace it. Pull mulch back from direct contact with the crowns during the growing season. The crowns need airflow. They need to be able to dry after rain. Mulch pressed against crown tissue is not protecting the plant. It is slowly creating the conditions that will damage or kill it. Your mulch should be a moisture-conserving, weed-suppressing layer positioned around the plant, not on top of it. But there is one more thing happening inside old mulch that most gardeners never discover until the damage is already done. And this one will change how you think about autumn cleanup. Slug eggs do not hatch quickly. They are laid in late summer and autumn, buried in moist organic matter, and they overwinter successfully inside compacted mulch layers, even through significant freezing temperatures. This means that the mulch you leave in place through winter is not just sheltering adult slugs that survive cold snaps in deeper soil. It is incubating next season's entire slug population. Every cluster of eggs laid inside that layer in September is a slug emerging in May, positioned directly beneath your first flowers, ready to reach your first fruit before you ever know it is there. Removing old mulch in autumn or very early spring breaks that cycle before it starts. If you have lifted your strawberry mulch this season and found what was living underneath it, or if you have lost berries to slugs year after year without understanding why, share your experiences in the comments. I look through every one of them, And this community has taught me things about garden problems I never would have found in any research paper. And if someone you know is still leaving last year's mulch in place under their strawberries right now, share this with them before the season gets any further along.